There is always a moment when time seems to stand still. For Ethan Gale, that moment came at noon, in a gleaming glass skyscraper on Fifth Avenue, where he was signing another deal. He was 52, an age when nothing surprises anyone anymore. He had it all, a chain of hotels, a private island, an art collection that even museums would envy. But within minutes, a phone call turned his empire into a sandcastle. "Mr. Gale, this concerns your son," the lawyer's voice broke. "Mark, he's been arrested. Suspicion of financial fraud, money laundering. The names of your companies are on the FBI's watch list." The world went dark. His son was his heir, his pride, his copy that he was raising for a new generation. Ethan sank into his chair, unable to hear the words. The street outside the window was filled with the wails of sirens, although they were only the sounds of New York. It seemed to him that the city was celebrating his downfall. By evening, the news had already shown a photo of Mark in handcuffs. Cameras were flashing, reporters were shouting, and the headlines were hitting his mind like bullets: the Gale dynasty under suspicion, an empire of lies, the end of the legend. Ethan sat in the darkness of his penthouse. On the table stood an untouched glass of whiskey. He heard two truths within himself. The first was that he was innocent of anything, the second was that he had spent his life building an empire in such a way that sooner or later the sins would come out. "Mark, what have you done?" he whispered, but deep down he feared something else, that his son was simply imitating his own methods. Gale's empire was tottering. And the first crack occurred where he least expected it, in his own blood. The attack was lightning fast. Government agents began to inspect his businesses, journalists organized a manhunt. What was considered glory yesterday was now a trap. His photos from glossy magazines were cut out to be used in exposés. Partners turned away one by one, fearing a scandal. A dinner with investors, which he had been preparing for months, ended in cold smiles. One of his old allies whispered to his face, "You created this monster yourself, Ethan. Don't be surprised if he devours you." His wife went into hiding, declaring through her lawyers that she had no knowledge of his dirty deeds. Friends were silent. And worst of all, his son refused to give evidence that could clear his name. He was silent like an enemy. One evening, Ethan turned on the TV and saw a debate in the Senate. One of the senators openly accused his company of offshore connections and financing illegal operations. It was a verdict. His voice, loud as a gunshot, branded him. "Mr. Gale is a symbol of what America can no longer tolerate. His empire is built on deception." He dropped the remote control and the screen shattered into shards. For the first time in his life, he felt truly tired. His body was heavy, his mind was shattered, and his heart was empty. Everything he loved had turned away. That night, he wrote a letter to his son: "I could have taught you wealth. But I guess I didn't teach you honor. And now we're both paying the price." A tear fell on the paper. For the first time in decades, he cried. He understood, this was not just an attack. This was a conspiracy. And the loss was not the end. There was a fall ahead. When the world turned away, help came from the most unexpected place. In a bar on the outskirts of town, where he was hiding from the cameras, a woman approached him. Short, in a worn leather jacket, with eyes that saw more than he wanted to. "You don't remember me, Mr. Gale. But I worked for your company 15 years ago. My name is Sarah." She handed him a folder. Inside were documents he had never seen, correspondence, agreements, signatures. All of them proved that others were operating under his name, front people who were using his empire for operations he had no idea about. "You were betrayed," she said. "But you signed the documents yourself without reading them. You gave them a weapon against you." Hope flared in his chest. It was like a ray of light in a tunnel. For the first time, he saw the bigger picture. His downfall was not just because of his son, but because of a conspiracy of the people he trusted most. That night they sat in a cheap bar and talked until dawn. She spoke frankly, without fear, and he found himself thinking that for the first time in years he was listening not to a businessman, not to a politician, but to a human being. "You have a chance, Ethan. But you have to decide, do you fight for yourself or for the truth?" Her words cut through him like a blade. He knew that ahead lay a discovery that would change everything. Having gathered the evidence, Ethan decided to speak publicly. It was a risk. He could go to prison, but silence meant the death of his name. He went to a press conference. The cameras were shining in his face, the reporters were shouting, and for the first time he did not hide. His voice was firm. "I was blind. My name was used, my empire was turned into a shadow machine. But if America wants the truth, it will get it. Even if the price is my life." The crowd froze. He showed documents, named names. People he considered brothers, friends, partners. He burned bridges, and he knew there was no way back. That night he got a call. The voice on the receiver said coldly, "You signed your own sentence, Ethan." He smiled for the first time in a long time. "Maybe. But at least now I am not living in vain." His empire crumbled. The hotels were sold, the island was taken away, the paintings were sold at auction. He was left with nothing but his name. But the strange thing was, people began to treat him differently. His words about the truth were broadcast on all channels. For some, he remained a traitor, for others, a symbol of redemption. He was sitting in a small house on the ocean shore when Mark arrived. His son watched silently, then whispered, "Dad. I didn't know it would end like this. I'm sorry." Ethan hugged him. There was silence in his chest, warm and real. He no longer had an empire, but for the first time he felt that he had a son. Is it possible to be rich and honest, he thought, listening to the sound of the waves. Probably not. But maybe you can be honest and remain human. And that's more expensive than all the money in the world. The world was setting its traps again, but he was no longer afraid. Because where money ends, truth begins. America craved spectacle, and it came. The trial of Ethan Gale became the most media-driven event of the decade. Cameras were installed even in the hallways, thousands of people watched under the building. His name became a symbol of the downfall of the rich, and every newspaper called the trial the case of the century. His lawyers pleaded not guilty. But Ethan took the stand and said, "I'm not asking for an excuse. I'm asking for the truth. If it costs me my freedom, I'll pay." His words divided the country. Some saw him as a hero, others as a manipulator playing on emotions. Witnesses testified, names he once called friends now stabbed him in the back. Every day in court was like a battle. But the most painful moment was when Mark was called to testify. His son. He stood before the judges, his voice shaking. "I can't say my father is innocent." He knew more than he let on. The words pierced Ethan's heart like a bullet. In that moment, he realized that the true verdict was not handed down by the court, but by his own blood. The sentence was harsh, 10 years. For a billionaire accustomed to islands and private jets, prison was a different universe. But it was there, among the gray walls, that he found something strange, peace. He began to write. A book about his life, not as a businessman, but as a man who lost everything to understand the price of truth. The manuscript spread beyond the prison and became a bestseller. For the first time, people saw him not as a symbol of corruption, but as a man who had walked through fire. One day, in the prison library, he received a letter. From Mark. His son wrote, "I testified against you because I was forced to. I was blackmailed. I was afraid. But now I understand, you chose honesty, even when you lost everything. You taught me not wealth, but truth. I will wait for you to start over with a clean slate. Ethan smiled. His empire was ashes, but in those ashes something greater was being born. The legacy was not in money, but in the truth he would leave behind. He looked up at the small barred window and thought. Perhaps empires must fall so that men can be born.